We're sitting here together with Cindy Clark that has participated in a breakfast meeting this morning, and we would like to ask some additional questions. So very welcome, Cindy. And to start with, why is it important with a binding treaty?
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here. Corporate power today is having a huge impact on the world and on human rights. So 3 corporations make more in a year than over 160 countries' accumulated GDP. It's having a devastating impact on the environment. It's having a devastating impact on people's lives. We need a binding tool that can help us fight impunity and promote corporate accountability to human rights standards that our states and governments have agreed to. And so the binding treaty is a process for us to open that conversation about what is the economy that we want to see, what is the role that corporations should be playing in our communities, and to have a tool that we can use for that accountability.
Could you say something more about where we are now in the process? Where are we at with the binding treaty?
So civil society has very strongly mobilized around the binding treaty process to inform its development. There is a very strong consortium, Feminists for a Binding Treaty, that are diverse organizations working from issues ranging from environmental rights to labor to women's rights, who are coming together to craft important positions and influence a gender perspective in this treaty. Next month, we are entering the 5th session of the open-ended intergovernmental working group on transnational corporations and other businesses and their impact on human rights. And so we are excited to see that there has been important movement and some inclusion of feminist demands within the binding treaty language. And we hope this will be a space where we can take that further. We are seeking support for gender impact assessments and for ensuring that women and transgender people are able to access justice and remedies within the process. However, we are concerned because some states have now spoken out against civil society participation in the next session, and that is very alarming because we think a fundamental principle of how the process needs to work is to include the voices of civil society. So that is a key next step.
So as we know here in Sweden, Sweden is a big proponent of using like a gender perspective in free trade negotiations, and there's a strong like business involvement and business perspective. But I was reading that Feminists for a Binding Treaty were saying that this is more about moving beyond the business case. So I was curious to hear what that means.
Yes, that's very important because on the one hand, we know that to appeal to corporations or entities that are driven by a logic that prioritizes profit over, say, environmental impact, it might be useful to make economic arguments about how it helps increase your bottom line if you are supporting women and women's rights. But that's a very problematic argument because we are not willing to then justify discrimination or violence when that becomes profitable. So the binding treaty process is an opportunity for us to say to corporations very clearly, you are also accountable to the core universal human rights standards that have been established, and that is a critical part of your commitments. So it is not about fulfilling your responsibilities because it helps increase your profit, but this is your responsibility within the contexts where we live. And we want to really rethink that notion of being centered on solely a profit motive. How are we understanding what counts and what is important? It is also the quality of environment. It is also the rights of communities to earn decent livelihoods and be able to sustain their families.
So lastly then, what are the next steps? What need to be done now?
So it's an exciting moment, and I want to say it was a really great conversation that we had today. So I really value that there were representatives from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who came to the conversation, who were willing to engage, to share their perspectives, some of the difficulties that they face, and raise questions. And I thought there was really active participation from the group that was helpful to push the conversation forward. I think in terms of next steps, so Feminists for a Binding Treaty has certain statements and demands that we encourage other civil society organizations to have a look at, to sign on to incorporate within their own advocacy. So we're seeking strong civil society participation in the process. It's very important that we get more states on board with the binding treaty. Right now, we do not have many supporters from the wealthier states where corporations tend to have a lot of powerful influence. So it's a really important moment and hopefully an opportunity to engage the Swedish government in dialogue on their support for the binding treaty. We think it's very consistent with the feminist foreign policy approach, so we would really want to support that. And we are asking that the Swedish government and others as well continue to support civil society participation in the process. And I just want to end by saying I think we are very concentrated on advancing a binding treaty, and that will be an important tool in the future. However, just the conversations that we're able to have, like the one today, to question the kinds of economic systems that we have and the ones that we aspire to are critically important. So this process is about much more than just a treaty. It's the conversation that we need to have around the economies that we hope to build together. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.